This is the Benefits Buzz Podcast, your weekly pulse on what's happening in the world of employee benefits. Brought to you by your friends at WEX, who believe in simplifying benefits for everyone. Now listen up and let's get buzzed. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Benefits Buzz. Here we go. This week we are talking about integrations make your lives easier. That's what I'm talking about, right, Kelsey?
That's right. I think we hear that a lot when it comes to pretty much anything pertaining to benefits. It's always something makes your lives easier. And this is truly one of those things that if you do it right, I think it should make your life easier.
For sure. Everyone wants to find way more time back in their day. And I know integrations and all the tech, worry bubbles that come in your brain when you say the word integrations, trust me, the payoff is golden. And I can't wait to talk about some of the ways that you can save time. And we're going to learn from that from our esteemed guest we have on the show. His name is Kyle Reese. He is the Director of Business Development with Employee Navigator. Kyle, welcome to Benefits Buzz.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to talking with you guys today.
You bet. We're excited to explore all of it. In my voice, I'm making an integration sound as amazing and exciting as I can, but I know that you have an uncanny way of just making sure that all the value that comes from integrations really hits home. So let's jump into our conversation. It all comes down to, if we talk about making things easier, really what we're doing is we're addressing pain points. So what are the top HR pain points that integrations are looking to address?
Yeah, no, great question. And thanks again for having me on the podcast this afternoon. I think, there's really two broad topics that we're focused on here at Employee Navigator. And one is, as you kind of said, reducing or eliminating manual work. Obviously, HR are, typically bogged down in a lot of manual administration. And, to the extent that we can start to give HR time back, I think that's super valuable to us. And then, the other broad topic that we spend a lot of time thinking about is how to reduce compliance risks and allow HR to sleep a little easier at night. I think the big sort of long-term vision for us, or sort of North Star that we think about a lot that might wrap those two together, is really allowing HR to focus on building their business and not on a lot of the work that their responsibilities tend to entail. It's especially, you think about, you have smaller employers who might not have a dedicated HR manager. It might be a VP of finance who's wearing a few different hats, or a CEO who's wearing a few different hats. Or you have larger, mid to large size organizations who just have a lot going on. And, we really want to give you guys the tools, or give those organizations the tools to allow them to get back to the important work at hand.
Yeah, we, in preparation for our podcast, when we were planning out the season, we spent quite a bit of time with our own HR team, because we're part of a global organization, WEX, right? And so we have quite a large HR team, I would say. And we spend a lot of time with them, and it's just so interesting to hear their perspective on all the different things that fall on their plate. You know what I mean? And it's things that, as an employee, you think about, like, oh, they're party planners. Sometimes they spend time actually planning the holiday party, but you don't really think about that until it comes time where you're at the holiday party. So they have so many things on their plate, and alleviating time for them benefits every single employee in the organization. So I think the work that you guys do is super valuable. But I think it's a little bit misunderstood, because there are so many different types of integrations that exist, and people use this integration as like a bucket term, right? So dig a little bit deeper into integrations. Like, what different types are they, and how do they help employers save time?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. And I would say we sort of come at this from our perspective. That's not to say that we are, it's the right perspective. It's just sort of our view of the world. We're obviously in the benefits and sort of payroll space a little bit. And so that's sort of the primary lens that we think about how to eliminate manual work. There's, as you said, a whole bunch of other things that HR does. We're not going to help them make it easier to plan the Christmas party.
Well, you never know. If they don't have to type in things twice, you're giving them
Yeah,
time.
exactly.
There's not an integration for that yet. Well,
Yeah.
it's a future roadmap for your product, Kyle.
So I guess I would start by saying I think every business is a little bit different. WEX is obviously, as you said, a global business, and it's going to have really different problems that they're trying to solve for relative to a typical 100 life case who's going to have different problems from a company with 15 employees. So I think we always try to sort of have that context in the back of our minds that the problems that we're trying to solve for vary from one customer to the next. I think broadly speaking, we're really focused on solving or eliminating work as it relates to interactions that a company has with their insurance carrier, their payroll company, and generally their TPA as well on the Cobra and cafeteria administration side. And I think just to dig into some additional specific examples, maybe on the insurance carrier side, anytime an employee of yours enrolls in benefits during their new hire window, during open enrollment, anytime you terminate an employee, those enrollments have to be sent over to an insurance carrier. And for a huge majority of organizations, that's a manual process. It might literally be manual where you're rekeying data into a carrier's portal. You might be using a spreadsheet. You might be, some employee might be filling out a PDF application. And so all we're trying to do in that context is automate all of those enrollment events and send them over to a carrier so that if Eric, let's say, has a child and wants to add his dependent to their health insurance plan, that the HR doesn't actually have to get involved in that at all. Eric can go into a system, Employee Navigator, and add that dependent, and that dependent is then sent over to whoever the health insurance or dental insurance or vision insurance provider is that company works with. So I think there's a lot going on the enrollment side with with the insurance carriers. You also have Cobra TPAs, and so really basic example on that front are Cobra notices. Obviously, every employer is required to send out Cobra notices if an employee is terminated, and what we're trying to do on that front is again just automate that work. We can't eliminate the need to send the notice out. It's a federal requirement, but practically speaking, if Eric were terminated, which I'm sure he wouldn't be.
Yeah, I just added my dependent. Now I'm getting let go.
Yeah, it's a lot going on today. No, so if Eric was terminated, his HR manager might log in. They're going to add in the termination into Employee Navigator, and then that's it. That notification is going to go to a TPA. The HR doesn't have to worry about interacting with the TPA to confirm that it's sent out. That happens automatically. And then maybe a third example on the payroll side is payroll deductions. Eric or Kelsey, you guys have different payroll deductions for the different benefits that you're enrolled in, and sometimes those deductions are age bandits. They might actually change, when you have a birthday. And so all we're trying to do on that front is keep the deductions in sync with payroll so that your paychecks are accurate and the monies are getting into your bank account accurately. They're getting over to the insurance carrier accurately. So I think those are probably three sort of tangible examples of what we're talking about when we think about how these integrations really benefit employers.
Yeah, that's great. I loved all those, and thank you, especially the one that I got let go. I didn't care.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I think the paycheck one, when your paycheck is accurate,
Yeah, right. I think that's great because if I'm putting myself in the shoes of our listeners that I often do, those are the examples where I want to hear, the integration, it's the value add that you're getting. And thank you for sharing some of those. I might dig into some more of those later, but I appreciate those three good examples, different varieties of ways that integrations can really save time and streamline some processes. So that's awesome. So what are we talking about here, Kyle, when we look at what do we need to keep in mind, right? Or what do HR employers or HR pros and employers need to consider when evaluating the integration? What do we need to do about getting things set up? What's sort of the step-by-step process? Maybe not that granular, but what should they be expecting when they get into that? that
Yeah,
conversation?
well, I think maybe taking a step back, philosophically, what are we even talking, what are we trying to solve for broadly for HR when we're talking about integrations? We're obviously talking about multiple systems working together, an employee navigator and a WEX, or, an insurance carrier, something like that. And I think the whole purpose of doing that and building these integrations is to allow HR to work with their best-in-class systems and make sure that those systems work together. So you might have, again, just to try to be specific, you might be working with Employee Navigator, and I like to think that we have a pretty good benefits enrollment process, but we don't do payroll. We are not ADP or Paychex. We're not putting money into an employee's bank account, and so giving the HR the ability to have a really strong benefits enrollment experience and a really strong payroll experience is super important to us. And just knowing that doesn't always happen in one system, I think is really the purpose of why we're spending time on these integrations and spending time talking about them. Is HR should have the ability to pick best-in-class solutions and build the right solution for their organization. I think the one big piece of advice that I generally give when I'm talking with an employer is, obviously, when an integration is live, the whole purpose is that you should be able to set it and forget it and not have to worry about what's going on in the background on an ongoing basis. With that said, I think what gets overlooked sometimes during the setup process is that there is a setup process. And a lot of times that setup process is really making sure that the two systems that you're talking about are in sync. And a really practical example might be, an employer might be turning on an integration with Employee Navigator and WEX. And our two systems might have, for some employees, different addresses. Which address is the right address? Ultimately, HR needs to determine which address is the right address. And once they do that, the system should update automatically. So oftentimes there is a setup process that HR has to go through to make sure that the systems are in sync. And I think that gets overlooked. People hear integration and they think, oh, it'll just work. I can literally flip a switch and I don't have to do anything. Practically speaking, there is a setup process, but what that gets you at the end of it is that automation that everybody's looking for.
Yeah, it's funny because whoever invented the easy button, whatever company did those ads, I can't even remember.
I think it was Staples.
Yeah, okay, Staples. I mean, they ruined us forever because now everybody in the world just wants the easy button for everything, but there's always got to be a little bit of setup before you get to the good stuff.
Exactly.
So, when I think about HR pros, they're probably like, yeah, I get it. Like, I know all this stuff about integrations already. But maybe let's dig a little bit deeper into, they already have an integration in place or multiple integrations in place, to your point, with all the best-in-class tech providers out there. How do they go about really looking at the integrations that they have and seeing if there's any red flags or any areas where they need to optimize those integrations to really function at top performance?
Yeah, no, I think that's another really good question. So I think a good analogy for this is just how I think about my paycheck. So, I'm confident that our organization is paying me biweekly, and I don't feel the need to look at my bank account every payroll run because we've never had an issue. However, it's probably good to check every once in a while, once a quarter, a couple times a year, just to make sure that the amount is correct and nothing's changed. We generally think that HR should have a similar mindset as it relates to these integrations. The whole point is, again, everything should work without issue throughout the course of a given year for HR. With that said, making sure that that the data is accurate, maybe interacting with one of the vendors and just asking if they've had any issues that have cropped up over the past few months. I think just keeping tabs on what's going on is important, because ultimately, if something is broken, the downstream effect of that is going to hit your employee, and you're going to end up dealing with some issue at the employee level, and they're not going to be happy. So it's not something that comes up a ton, but I think, again, it's generally a best practice that you should take some time during the course of the year to make sure that all is good under the hood, as it were.
Yeah, you probably want to spot check a few times before it gets to the point where an employee is like, oh, my paycheck is not functioning.
Correct. And I keep using payroll examples.
You're like Kyle and you're not looking.
I have and I have a horrible example of that. Oh my God, for a couple of months, they weren't taking out any federal taxes. And I didn't realize until I went and checked like 3 months ago. So I love the example. It really hits home for me. And it cost a lot of money when I had to do taxes last year. So there's a lesson there.
Yeah, I would agree.
Sorry, I had to get personal there. So I love this. Thank you for all the really good examples. And I think, if we've got maybe an HR pro's mind churning right now, right? Like, okay, I get it. Maybe they have some integrations. They don't have any. And they're like, okay, I'm evaluating my technology setup. What are the things you talked about looking under the hood, right? What are some of the things that they should be like looking for when it comes to working with like an integration partner? I mean, anything from like price to quality to integrations offered. Like, there's probably a lot. It may be intimidating to kind of figure out what I should be looking for. What separates different types of integrations from others? How do I know if I have a great integration? All those kind of questions. It's kind of a big loaded question for you, Kyle, but I know you can handle it. Where do we start? What should they be analyzing?
Yeah, so maybe going back to one of the topics that we talked about a few minutes ago is if I were sort of in an HR shoes, there is a ton of information out there. There's a ton of different, integration, like you said, is sort of a loaded word in a sense. I think my starting point would be making sure that I'm clear on the problems that I'm trying to solve. Employee Navigator has 150 employees and WEX has thousands of employees. Our HR managers are probably dealing with different problem sets. And so I think the first step for the HR is really to kind of ask themselves and talk maybe internally with their constituents, what problems are we trying to solve for? Once they sort of get through that process internally, I think you had touched on a couple topics that are really important. Really, a really basic question is, these integrations going to cost me anything? So if you're talking Employee Navigator and WEX, does either Employee Navigator or WEX, as an example, charge a client to use an integration? It might not be Employee Navigator and WEX. It could be, whatever HR systems you're thinking about linking together. I think having an understanding of what the cost, if any, is obviously important. I also think that trying to get a sense of whether the two systems work well together is really important. And I think there's some really basic questions that you can go to your software vendors and ask. So again, just using Employee Navigator and WEX as an example, I might, if I were an HR manager, I might ask one of those organizations, how long have you guys been integrated? Is this something that just got set up a week ago, a month ago, or is this 1, 2, 3 years of experience that the organizations have working together? How many companies are using the integration? If someone said there's one company using the integration or 1,000, I'm going to have different levels of confidence in the quality of the integration, just because they've, someone who has thousands of groups on an integration is probably going to have worked out most of the kinks at that point. And then, are there any major pain points? So again, if someone were calling WEX and, and asking sort of how's your relationship with Employee Navigator? Are there any major pain points that you're dealing with as it relates to the technical aspects of the integration? Is this something we should have confidence in? And I think it's up to, organizations like WEX or Employee Navigator just provide sound guidance to the HR and not oversell them on anything, but just make sure they have sort of clear expectations for what they should expect. And I think that what to expect is both initial and ongoing expectations. So, going back to the setup conversation, what are the setup expectations? Is there anything that the HR knows they're going to have to be responsible for? And are they clear on those expectations? And are there any expectations on an ongoing basis? Is there any manual work that the HR is going to have to take on? And just knowing what's in store for them over the next year after something goes live, I think is super important. So those are maybe some initial topics that come to mind.
Those are perfect. I think those are some great takeaways that, if you're thinking about an integration, or even if you already have one, maybe you don't know the answers to those questions, you should probably look into it and reassess and see, are the integrations I have in place working for me today? Are they solving the problems? Like you said, I think always starting with what you're trying to achieve first makes total sense. So one thing I do want to end with is just by asking, and I know this is a really hard question to put you on the spot with, but do you have any specific examples of brokers or HR pros or companies that you've worked with and seen where they had that problem that they were setting out to try to solve? They worked with you on these integrations and then they solved that problem. So almost like a 30-second case study.
Yeah, no, good question. So maybe starting on the HR side, there was a client that we were working with 2 or 3 months ago, and just to be very candid, one of the problems that they were trying to solve for was a cost problem, and they were spending. They had their employees enrolling in their benefits on a different system, and it was costing them, call it between $10,000 and $20,000 a year just for that functionality. And that client and their broker had come to Employee Navigator to make sure that we could handle their benefit offering, meaning would we be able to support all of the benefits that they were making available to their employees, and if so, would we be a good fit for that client? And our business model is, we work with brokers who then put their clients on Employee Navigator, and the brokers are generally not charging their clients to do so. So the client ended up moving over to Employee Navigator, and just from a pure cost standpoint, was able to save, again, between $10,000 and $20,000 a year just by having their employees enroll in benefits on Employee Navigator. And I think that worked out because we are also integrated with that payroll vendor that they were using previously. So all of those payroll deductions from the benefits the employees were enrolling in are continue to be synced up with that payroll system. So there's just a huge cost savings that we were able to deliver to that HR. I think on the broker side, brokers are really, I think, acting as a back office for a lot of the clients that they work with. And there was a sort of mid-sized regional agency in the Midwest that we were talking with a few months ago, and they had started to turn on these various carrier integrations across their book of business to automate, again, the enrollments for new hires and terminations and open enrollments. And that agency was able to automate something like 10,000 individual tasks over the course of a given year. And that 10,000 tasks is really, again, it's sort of this crazy. It's this buildup of all these little things that take 5 minutes. So you might not feel the real value of these integrations right away, but as they build up over time, suddenly you're going from, okay, well, saving 5 minutes isn't that great. Well, then it's saving a few minutes a day and a few hours a week, and all of a sudden you're saving actual man hours, and they are redirecting personnel resources internally because they don't have to do all of this manual administration. So I think that's exactly what we wanted to hear, as it relates to some of the brokers that we work with.
Yeah, we always say they're in the background, but eventually you're going to feel it. You're going to feel the impact.
I'd agree 100%.
I love it. And talk about rising to a challenge. Those were two killer examples. I saw like $10,000 and $20,000 and a lot of time saved. So that's fantastic. Thank you for that, Kyle. Hey, I hate to wrap the conversation, but I suppose we should keep the viewers and listeners wanting more. So thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been really good to dive into all this. So I appreciate your time. We'll make sure to include some of those details in our show notes as well. So much appreciated, sir.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. WEX is in the business of simplifying benefits for everyone. Now, although we certainly hope our podcast sparks some aha moments, like that was pretty cool, but of course we cannot provide legal, investment, or financial advice. And, well, therefore, nothing shared in this podcast should be interpreted as such. We encourage you to seek out appropriate professional advice regarding your plans. Hey, congratulations! You made it through our disclaimer. Thanks for listening.